Woohoo!
Sweet. All right. Well, let's get rocking and rolling. Gordon just keeps adding more categories we're tracking. This market report keeps getting longer and longer, which means we got to go faster and faster to keep it in 90 minutes. Welcome, everybody, to the market report summarizing our Q3 of 2023. As always, we'll be going through several categories. We like to jump back and forth between the United States perspective and then really narrow in just on the Utah real estate market. Gordon spends countless hours putting this together, so always a big shout out to G, my friend that's a rapper, Payne. G Payne is his rapper name. As always, we publish these. So one of the things that me and Gordon put our heads together on several years ago for regional value is just doing one solid report every single quarter. We've done this for almost 2 years now, right, Gordon? And he publishes the PDF report. So if you're new to this, you go to kwutah.com, click on resources under the agent resources button. There, the quarterly market reports are there for your downloading pleasure. And you can use these in your listing, buyer consultations, educating your clients, your newsletters, whatever. And then, as always, we record this quarterly and put it on kwutah.tv. So Joe Rogan's podcast is right here. kwutah.tv is just right there. We are neck and neck, Gordon. So thank you for your publicity on this. So let's talk. This is something, Gordon, you and I wanted to talk about. Just what does the population of the realtor world look like? How's it been moving the last several years? So NAR is going to be the left side of the screen numbers. The blue line right there. So we were floating right around the 1.6 million realtors for at least the last couple of years. You can see, pre-recession, those early 2000s, just how it shot up in that great real estate market. We hit that great recession, and there was even a lag of 6 months, 12 months, where you start seeing some realtor population get out of the business. And then we had a decline all the way down to 1 million realtors that we hovered there for a couple of years, and then back up to the 1.6. But UAR, we thought we peaked in 2007, right around that 16,000 number. We also declined in the Great Recession, but we almost hit that 20,000 realtor population number. But we've actually been declining the last couple of years, surprisingly already. I've heard different reports, as well as many of you have, but we're seeing a lot more inactives. As units come down, there's less market share to go around there. So I've heard a number as high as 200,000 realtors we could lose over the next year or so. We'll see how this whole NAR and lawsuit thing affects the realtor population. But here's year over year. You can see just year to date, UAR, we're down 2.62% population. NAR, we're down 1.32%. Worst year for UAR drop was at 2009, down 15.86%. And this is what I wanted Gordon to pull, because here's the story, right? And I was surprised when you pulled this, Gordon, on how low UAR sides per agent has dropped, which we're year to date, we're right around 3 sides on average per Utah realtor in the state right now. You can see NAR has slid down to 5.3.
And I think one of the things that you and I discussed is the reason why we think that it's down so low for Utah is we've got so many part-time agents.
Yep. Just more part-time that are either at 0 or maybe 1 transaction, something like that. A little bit more of that hobby realtor, I guess, population potentially. Or it also could be investors. I think we have a pretty entrepreneurial state, so you might have a lot of just licensed investors that just bring that down, even though they're not necessarily closing deals out there. Here is just kind of the Utah snapshot. So let's primarily kind of look at the year-to-date numbers. New listings, 41,000 year-to-date compared to 52,000 where we're at last year. We're down 20.7% of new listings on the market. A lot of those people we'll see this in a second, but just good mortgage rates that are just kind of hunkered in there, not seeing as many homes coming on the market. Pending sales, this is your under contracts. The number of pending sales were down 12%. Closed sales, we took a drop last year, right? So even comparing year to date with that last chunk of the year last year, that was negative, but we're down 18.3% on units. Days on markets almost doubled, right? 103.7%. And this is the one that we're outpacing the United States, but our prices dropped faster, right? We went up so fast, so we're seeing a little bit of that depreciation at negative 5.8%. So values have came down 5.8. We're sitting right there at 485,000 median sales price, which is still a big number. But percent original list price down 3.8%. So we're at 96.4% of homes are selling at 96.4 of the original list price. Continue to have the housing affordability challenges, slowed down a little bit, but still down. We're at 67 on the index. We'll show you what that looks like perspective wise. Homes for sale, because less units, even though there's less listings that came on the market, the number of homes sitting on the market is up, right? So we got 28.8% current homes for sale more than we were at last year, which is no doubt going to drive that month's supply of inventory up 72.8, floating right around that 3% on average this year. Home sales. So let's look at those main categories. So this is home sales. Last year we were at 5 million homes sold. 2021 6.1. You can still see the teal blue is kind of a grow market, where you see the yellow there post Great Recession. But this is the crazy number, right, Gordon? I'm surprised when I saw this after you put it on there. Rolling 12 months at the end of September, we officially fell under 4 million homes sold in the country. So 3.96, which it's been a really long time since we've been there, right? So we are overall down right around that 40% from the peak.
Yep, we haven't been down that low since the 80s.
Yep. Annual new homes sold. So you got some data specifically on brand new construction homes sold in the country. So you can see year to date, we're at 684,000 just strictly new homes sold, which is up from last year. So we're up 5.3%, which is great. Potentially pacing maybe for 2021 numbers, but still 2020 was the peak of the last 15 years. But that average 33-year average should be 699,000. You see the overbuilt days, underbuilt days, and maybe a little bit more kind of in line with where we need, but still a shortage out there. So here's new home sales just on a month-to-month basis. So we even started out the year out a little bit lower and climbed up to 759,000 just last month.
And that has a lot to do with the interest rates, because the builders are buying those down where existing homes you can't.
Yeah.
Well, you can, but it's a lot more difficult.
Yeah, builders are just so much more willing to throw some cash at solving the mortgage rate problem, right? Which is still helping some new construction sales. But like Gary said, 2023 is still projected to be the third highest volume real estate sales year ever recorded, projecting somewhere around that 2.13 trillion. Is that trillion, right? 2.13
yeah, trillion.
We peaked there at 2.53 last year. The year before, post-COVID, just nuts, crazy of a year, 2.83 trillion. And you see we were averaging that 1.6 million agent count last year. So the volume has been our saving grace. That purchase price hanging on there, even though units dropped, it totally hasn't felt like that. A lot of people I've talked to the last several months, how's your year going to shape up? How's your year going to end? A lot of them says, oh, well, my units are down, but surprisingly, my volume or maybe even my commissions are still kind of hanging in there from where they were last year. Some of them even exceeded it, which is great. Even the luxury market still continues. You Park City agents, you continue to baffle me just on what the Park City market does. That is not totally relatable with the rest Wasatch Front, just because so many of those deals are cash transactions still. I think what they say 65% of Park City still cash transactions, something like that. So here is Utah annual home sales. So 2022 we were at 42,000. But if you take the first 10 months, or the first 9 months, the 3 quarters, we're at 36,000 last year pacing. So we are under 18% where we were pacing last year. So 18% less homes sold, like we talked about that snapshot. But even 2022 was a 24.8, almost a quarter drop. And then even 2021 was still a drop. So that 2020 was no doubt a crazy year for total homes sold. And here is a month number. So 3,108 last month, 3,615. You kind of just see every month we've been underperforming where we were at in 2022, and for sure underperforming 2020 and 2021. Home prices, the country has hung on, right? You can see pre-recession, we got above that 4% trend line that we like to talk about. We went under so much. We caught up, but primarily caught up in 2021, 2022, and surpassed it. So 2022, we ended at that 386,000 median price across the country. Right now, we're at 389. So we are hovering right at that, even though Utah dropped. But again, at that point, we were 12% above the trend line. So even as that trend line goes up, 2023, we're probably going to be what, maybe 10%, maybe even 9% above that trend line when we finish. Here's a month-to-month number. So again, we started January at 359, went up to 410, 407 the last couple months. We dropped to 394. That was a pretty big drop just last month, which is probably what is getting us back on pace. But overlapping the interest rate, you can see that interest rate. I like when the interest rate is below the purple lines visually, but I guess it is what it is. U.S. median home payment, principal and interest. This is a 20% down on a median purchase price home in the country. The median home payment, principal and interest at mortgage rates, the average mortgage rates of 7.2. The payment across the country is $2,141, which is up from last year of $1,701. But 2021, the old affordable days, right, Gordon, $1,170. And this is how Utah compares to that. So again, we just didn't fall too far under that trend line when we remapped that for Utah to match the United States. But we just have so appreciated so quickly the last several years. But 510, our median price across the state last year was 510,000. We're averaging right now median price at 485. So that drop that we've seen. Utah home prices by month. You can kind of see we've just kind of hovered there for a little bit. We dropped right at the beginning of the year, but we didn't go up like the country did. We kind of just have been hovering right around that 490-ish mark. But this is the big one. This is not the one we want to be beating the United States on, but average, median sales price in the state of Utah with a median mortgage rate, 20% down. What is our median payment in Utah? $2,890 as of last end of quarter. We bumped up to $2,500 in 2022, but again, 2021, that's quite a big jump. We're almost double in a 24 months. We're up 100% on that payment, which is what's killed our affordability. Here's our comparison, Utah with the United States. Kind of see flat line there with the US and then the drop with Utah. Here is on a year-by-year percent appreciation mark. So we're up 0.7%. As you can see that Great Recession time period. We dropped maybe 25% total depreciation. The last 2 years, though, we went up 18.2 and 10.2. But here is Utah. Again, we out appreciated the United States 25% in 1 year, up 13% last year, up 11.6 in 2020. So no doubt we just took a little too much appreciation. So we're seeing that correction down 5.8%. And Gordon, correct me if I'm wrong, if we finish that technically will be the third highest depreciation, because you got 7.9, well, actually be the second highest, right? 7.9 since the Great Depression, right? Which is, it still doesn't necessarily feel like that because we gained so much equity. So I think we're able to correct and not feel that, but it still is the second biggest drop ever in Utah history since the Great Depression, depreciation-wise. U.S. inventory, 3 months, right at 3 months of inventory across the United States year to date. We're pretty much there last year. But here's on a month-to-month basis, just counting in September, we popped up to 3.3, which right after COVID hit, we got up to 4.6, but we're still half of the month's supply of inventory that it would take to be back in a buyer's market. But 3.3 is the highest we've been for a minute, for sure. Here is your U.S. pending home sales index. So right above 100, if we're above that, it's expanding. Like we can see the trajectory that there's going to be more homes sold. If we're below that, it probably represents a contracting. So right now we're at that 77.6% index of pending home sales, which is directly related to us being at that 3.96 homes sold in the country. Here's your month by month pending home sales index, finished September at 72.6 on the index scale. But here is the new single family housing units completed. Again, I like that you put those average trend lines. We should be at that 12.3, which basically represents 1.2 million homes built every year that we should be at. So we dropped from, we were there last year, but we've dropped down to 10.1 year to date. So kind of went backwards on the number of homes being completed or units being
We
completed.
just barely missed it last month or last year.
Yeah, because we've been 12.3, but 12.2, yeah,
Yep.
we were just barely shy. And even us being there, like you look at the last decade or 15 years, we've been under that trend line, which is why we've got that lack of homes shortage that we've got going on. Here's month to month. But here's the one I like. I'm glad you put this in there, Gordon. We're very analytical in the state of Utah. So we're tracking increase in housing units. So just the number of housing units that have came online. The purple represents increase in households. That's either us multiplying and replenishing the earth, or it's positive migration from primarily California, but a lot of states moving into Utah. And we have more of that than we have people moving out. So you see 2023, the forecast, they're projecting we're going to increase somewhere around 27,000 households in the state of Utah. We only have brought on 22,000 housing units. So our cumulative shortage is 33,000 homes underbuilt right now in the state of Utah. Next year, they've already given us some projections. They're projecting that cumulative shortage to even widen to 37,000 homes underbuilt, which we've carved into this chunk, 2015, 16, 17, 18. Thankfully, our builders have caught up a little bit of that, but still, we're 37,000 homes by the end of next year underbuilt in this country. Which here's county by county. So this is 2021 to 2030 housing demand. If you're going to be a builder in Utah or Salt Lake County the next 7 years, probably a decent, secure business with how many units we're going to need. But units built 2011 to 2020. So Utah County is a good example. 50,000 have been built. We're going to need by 2030, 66,000 more. And Washington, you're kind of in that pink right there too, with all the increase in households. But here's US showing index. A higher number means an average home receives more buyer visits in a given month. All index values are scales relative to the initial index of 100. So we've kind of been going down since, what is that, February, March-ish, just the amount or quantity of showings on the typical listed home. And then year over year percentage change. So we've been kind of increasing for, all of 2023 on the index scale. So months of inventory in Utah, kind of pacing right there with the United States at 3 months of inventory, but a pretty big jump from last year since we were averaged at 2.1. But we're pacing up the last several months, right? 3.7 months of inventory. That also surprised me when I saw this, Gordon, after you pulled all the last quarter's data. We're trickling up there. We haven't been at 4 months of inventory in the state of Utah for quite a while. Even post-COVID, you saw we only got up to 2.9-ish, 2.8. So we were outpacing the COVID supply of inventory there. New listings, we talked about that at the very beginning. Year to date right now, we've seen 41,000 homes come on the market to be sold, which is, quite a bit under the peak of that 70,000 in 18, 19, 2020, down 20.70% from where we were last year.
And keep in mind, that's only 9 months, not the full year.
Right. And here's your month to month, so 4,703, but still underpacing, where we were in 2022. So, okay, percent of new residential listings sold. So basically, if it's over 100% that month, they're eating into the inventory. So whatever they listed that month, they sold that amount and ate into some of the existing inventory, which is surprising. That happens always in December, because I guess so few listings come on in December. We sell more than came on and we eat into the inventory. But we've been pacing around that 60%, so almost 40% surplus of listings coming on the market to go into that inventory. Residential sold, here's a month-to-month basis. You can kind of see that data looking differently. But homes for sale, so this is when it was polled, how many homes are on the market at any given time? Kind of that late 2021. It's crazy how low we got, but we at the end of September, we're at 11,478, still drastically under the 19-year average of 18.3 thousand. Homes for sale, you can kind of see on a month-to-month basis. 11,478 homes for sale. And here is year over year. So we're up 28.8% from last year. 2022 was up 79%. And then the couple years before that, we actually were decreasing in inventory because stuff was just selling so fast, right? Here's pending sales, 30,414. So the first 9 months of the year. Year to date 2022, so where we were pacing the first 9 months of 2022, we're down 12.9% from this time last year. But overall 2022 was down 27% at 40,000. Average days on the market. So Gordon, did we conclude that this is not including under contract period, but the Utah numbers are including the under contract period?
Yes.
Okay. So 2023, you can see, went crazy. 24 days on market right now. And then there'd be the under contract period, where the Utah numbers you can see includes the under contract period. 55 days on the market for the state of Utah right now. Days on market, you can see month by month. Mortgage rates. It's all the mortgage people's fault, right, Gordon? Historical average from 72 to 21, that yellow line, 7.8. So we are right there on the 50-year average. And then historical average the last 30 years would have been 5.97. So hopefully we journey towards that 30-year average soon, hopefully sooner than later. But you can kind of see average 30-year fixed rate mortgage. We're still pacing with the whole year average. The first 9 months was 6.73, but I know we're floating in the mid high sevens the last several weeks. But you can see on a week to week, month to month basis, 7.62. And this is as of the end of October, 7.62. Here's your 30-year versus fixed, the 15-year fixed rate mortgage, which we're about 0.75% lower interest rate typically right now on the 15-year compared to the 30-year. But this is the story, Gordon. This is so fascinating. I'm glad you found it. 89% of the United States mortgages have a rate of 5% or less. And this is, I can't remember exactly what you said yesterday when we were going over the slides, but you called this is the reason for the stall. Is that what you said, Gordon?
Well, yeah, this is the winter freeze. I mean, we hit 8%, just like we did last year at 7%. And we're going to see a couple months of everybody holding their breaths. And then at the first of the year, they're going to go, oh, okay, well, the sky didn't actually fall. And there's still going to be the 3Ds, death, diapers, and divorce.
Yeah.
Those things still need to sell. It didn't actually completely stop.
What age is the diaper phase?
What?
What age is the diaper phase?
In their 20s.
Oh, okay.
Well,
it's a different.
Here in Utah, early 20s.
Okay.
Or late 80s.
Yeah.
Thank you, Bart. So it's crazy. Even just look at 59% of mortgages are under 3.5, and then 76% of mortgages are under 4% right now in the country, right? Which is why when rates went up as fast as they are, there's just a lot of sellers that normally would have sold the last 12 months, but have just chosen to hunker down because they can't go buy what they're currently living with because their rate's so great, right? We were talking about Canada. I don't know the exact stat, but it's somewhere above the 70 or is it above 80%? Because we're very unique with a 30-year fixed rate mortgage product. If not, we're one of the only, if not the only country that actually has such a great banking system with those 30-year fixed rate mortgages. The vast majority of worldwide, even KW Worldwide, we track a lot of this data. that most of them are sitting on 3, 5, maybe 7-year ARMs, the adjustable rate mortgages, every country, right? Which is what really led to some of the challenges we had in the Great Recession. In Canada, do you know the number? Is it above 80% of their mortgages are set to adjust up by 2025? Is that the number? So like they
Yeah.
have a disaster coming because
Yeah.
their rates, you know, are somewhat similar. But if all of a sudden 80% of your mortgages adjust up in the next 18 months, that's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and they're very concerned about Australia, New Zealand, England as well. They're all in the same situation by 2025, where they're going to have this sticker shock of, oh my gosh, my home payment just rose 40%.
Yeah. So they are very motivated to get inflation down as fast as they can, so they can probably get their rates down, so that becomes less of an impact. But we'll see what happens.
And you know, when our shift, you and I talked about this during our next upcoming shift, people are not going to move away from their home because they've got that fixed interest rate. Their home payment's going to be less than rent for the most part.
Yeah.
For the majority of people that have a home mortgage.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the gap between the Fed funds rate, the lever that the Federal Reserve moves on the Fed rate, and the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. So you can kind of see we're about 1.9% gap from the Fed rate to the average mortgage rate as of just the end of September. But you can kind of see some of these other gaps. Look, even like September 2013, 10 years ago, it was virtually zero Fed rate, but we were at 4.5%. So there's a 4.5% rate gap between the Fed rate and mortgage rates, where we're sitting at 1.9. Does that mean even when the Fed rate was there, that mortgage companies were just making that much more profit, Gordon? You think that's what's happening back then?
Well, the 10-year, and this shows a really good picture of this next slide on how much they started buying of those mortgages backed by the Federal Reserve to keep things under control.
Yeah, yeah. So we peaked at $2.7 trillion the Federal Reserve owned in mortgage-backed securities. So these banks, financial institutions, you know, they originate mortgages, they pack it all up, and then they would sell this mortgage-backed security to, you know, many investors and buyers, but Federal Reserve is one of the biggest buyers of it, and they had 2.7 trillion. So in the last year, 18 months, they've unloaded somewhere around that $250–300 billion, which it looks like just a little drop, but $300 billion last time I checked. I don't know how we'd live off that. Could we live off that, Gordon?
Yeah.
But $250–300 billion drop in the assets they own in mortgage securities. So this we'll see this at credit availability, but that's been one of the challenges, is when they're selling those and not buying those, the available credit in the overall mortgage market becomes less, right? Like, so credit availability goes down, which banks, institutions will probably prioritize, you know, better borrowers. So it's really maybe like that mid-grade, you know, positive credit score group or whatever that's having the most challenges, right? Here's total Fed Reserve assets. Right now, there's floating around $8 trillion of assets. Most of it is crypto, right? Dogecoin, just kidding. $8 trillion of assets, which is similar to Gordon's balance sheet. The annual MBA purchase index includes all mortgage applications for the purchase of a single family home. It covers the entire market, both conventional and government loans. This is basically just the index of just the health of the mortgage market, right? So we're right now, year to date, 162 on that index scale, which, you know, compared to 472 in 2005, definitely less mortgages being written right now. Here's the weekly one. So even the average, the last several months, we're at 140s, which you can see at least the last 4 years on this, it's the lowest, but it's the lowest it's been for a long time. Here's that mortgage credit availability on an index. So we're down 16% credit available compared to last year, which was down 8%, which was down 8%, which was down 26% of credit availability. There was just a bunch of money thrown into the market, 2018, 19, just on lending. Here's just on a month-to-month basis of that index. But here's the other big one, right? Which if you overlap these, it would make that index like way worse. But here's the refinance index, covers all mortgage applications to refinance an existing mortgage. kind of the overall gauge of refinancing activity. So this tracks almost 25 years, but it's the lowest refinance index in 25 years. Which you just saw how fast that purple line, the rate went up, which is how fast those refinance market kind of crashed, right? And I do wonder who's refinancing. Either they have to refinance, or who knows, right? I'm sure all of our mortgage friends would like more refinance applications if they could. But so you pulled a bunch of just, distressed kind of stats, Gordon, for this market report as we kind of watch. You and I kind of believe we're already in kind of a recession. A lot of analysts are saying that we will hit the recession early next year, whatever. But foreclosure filings increased 28% from the previous quarter and 34% from a year ago. New cases filed in the third quarter did rise slightly from the same period last year and actually dipped quarterly, showing signs that the upward pattern may be easing. So this is U.S. properties with foreclosure filings. So this is in the thousands. So quarter three was 124,000 foreclosure filings. Quarter two was 89,000. Quarter one, 95,000. And you can see that foreclosure rate percent of housing units. I think that's got to be percent of all housing units, not necessarily just housing units with mortgages, right, Gordon?
I think it's just with mortgages.
Okay.
Because half of our housing units don't even have mortgages.
Okay. So the peak was 2.23% of all housing units with the mortgage had a foreclosure rate, which that was such a lower number than I thought. So I think we were underestimating the amount of good standing mortgages. But the next one, you've got the average percent of mortgage debt 90 days late. So this is just they hit that 90-day late period, which is usually one that triggers for a notice of default. But we were upwards of 7% of mortgage debt had 90-day lates on that default list. But even as of quarter two, because this is one that really lags on when they put the data out, but we're at 1.48% of mortgages were 90 days late, which is it's still a really small number, primarily because they got equity, right? Whereas when equity evaporated, they didn't have a lot of options, but the short seller foreclosed. Now they can sell, and even if they're late, cash out some equity still, right? U.S. affordability, the index is at 100. So, being at the 203, basically that is a solid buying time. We've been under that 100 across the country for a while, but 95.5. So first time in 20 some years, we're under that 95 or that 100 index scale in the nation. We slipped as low as 88, bumped back up to 92 on this rolling month phase. But here's Utah. So we've been under that 100 for a while. We bumped back up 2021, but dropped down, averaging right now 67 on the affordability scale in the state of Utah. Just because our prices went up so fast, we're still dealing with the high mortgage rates out there. But here's a rolling month. We were at 66, which was still lower last year. We were at 64. Saw a little bit of rate reprieve. We've seen a little bit of reduction in purchase price, median values out there. So it's helped a little bit, but 67 still is not awesome. All right. Anything on that before we jump into investment, Gordon, that you wanted to add?
Nope.
Okay. So let's look at the rental market. Here's 2022 average rental rate. This is updated on a month-to-month basis on this other one, but here's where 2022 ended, 1,570 on Salt Lake. But here is yearly average rent growth. So 2022, we're up, 1, 2, 3, 5%, depending on the county. But 2021 was the year that rent shot up, right? That really was a big bump. Even my rentals, some of the rent increases when we turn over tenants was $100, $200, $300, $400, per unit, which was crazy. But here's, average rent increases. So 2018 to 2022, and then 2021 to 2022. So in a 4-year period, Weber County jumped up 63% on rent. Where just 1 year, they jumped up 11%. You can see Utah County up 34% in a 4-year period, up 7% in a 1-year period. So this is some that you do have year-to-date numbers, right? So the HUD fair market, the fair market rent that they set. So HUD has to go determine fair market rent for different bed units. So 1, 2, 3, 4 bed across the country. That basically becomes their baseline for a lot of the governmental assistance programs. So they have set for 2024 a 4-bed HUD fair market rent at 2,452. Utah, a 3-bedroom is 2,168. A 2-bedroom 1,606. But here's where actual rents at in Salt Lake City. This is one of the reliable sources we have. 4 bedrooms averaging right now, Salt Lake in year to date is 2,768. So these are the numbers for next year, and we're already well above that. So they're almost like 2 years behind on their projections.
Yeah, they're actually 4. They take the last 4 and average it, and they're still this far behind.
So these are set when Obama was president. Just kidding.
Yeah.
All right. And again, here is the fair market rent per county that's set out there. Utah County, you see Twilla County, Salt Lake County. Cost burdens for Utah's 6 largest counties. So share of housing units that are renter occupied. So the blue represents out of all the units out there, how many are renter occupied, which cash, I know it's a little bit of a college town, but 36% of that county is renter occupied, where the orange-ish color is share of renters that are cost burden. The definition of cost burden is they're spending more than 30% of income on housing costs. So Washington County wins that category, that 49% of renters are considered in that cost burdened thing, which I'm assuming if they're cost burdened at the rent right now, their ability to purchase is not there either, right? And I know, what was the last stat? Maybe you have it on here, but it's like 15% of renters can actually afford to buy right now. It just keeps dropping the percent of renters that can afford to get into the buyer market. Okay. Let's skip that. Rent versus own. This came from Family Union last year. Still owning is good. Utah State's rent growth year over year change. You can see the last couple months we officially dropped in going down year over year on rent growth. But here's that 2021, just year over year, each month just was a pretty big bump up. So if you had rent at $1,200, it went up 15-20%. That's definitely another $200-$400. Here's rent growth month over month change, which this is why my property manager is so OCD on renewing our contracts in the summertime, because you see the seasonality just month over month. You can get more rent in the summer versus having those rental contracts expire in the winter. This is a new one you pulled too, right? So this is U.S. new build for rent, 2 or more units completed in the thousands. So you can kind of see that 48-year average, 2.88. So this is a lot of primarily apartment complexes, I'm assuming, Gordon, that have been coming online. They build it specifically to rent it out.
Yep. And
which,
we're 28 years below the 48-year average. So we haven't even built enough to keep up with what we've got.
Yeah.
And that's why rents are going.
Yeah. Which we've been above that trend line the last several years, which I almost feel like anywhere we've driven across the Wasatch Front the last 3, 4, 5 years, you see these massive apartment complexes going up. But all that's been doing is eating into a little bit of the lack of units that we have just because we were underbuilt for 28 years. So I don't know how you don't see just a tremendous amount of apartment buildings continue to be built the next 5 to 10 years in the United States, right?
Well, and the challenge in Utah is, where do you build them now? Especially along the Wasatch Front. There's no more land.
Islands on the lakes. I just
there
thought
you go.
of that idea, Gordon. I just thought of that idea. Patent it.
Fill in your view.
Or like Avengers, where we just build houses on like helicopters. Rental vacancy rates. This is a good one. Anytime you're crunching your rental analysis on a rental property, even though mortgage rates are making it hard to make those numbers look cool on a rental analysis, here is the vacancy number you should be putting on your projected vacancy. Utah, we ended 2022 at 4.5%. The United States was at 5.8%. The United States updates this data faster, but you can see we've been floating right around that 6.5% vacancy for a long time. 7% is considered balance. I grew up in the recession, so I was used to putting that 10% on my vacancy line when I'd crunch my rental analysis. It dropped all the way in Utah down to 3.8% vacancy. But that 7% vacancy is probably a good solid spot. It's still low enough that we can budget for it as landlords, but it's still giving renters enough options out there. So the U.S. economy. U.S. economy, would you grade it A, B, C, or D right now, Gordon?
Depends on what you're looking at. I mean, we're still in that split where, the people that have money and assets are doing great. The people that don't have assets, they're not doing great.
It's getting harder, right? So here's GDP, the gross domestic product, which is an accumulation of all products and services the United States has, which is kind of how we just track the overall health of the economy. 2022, we were up 1.9%. You saw the COVID bounce down, but then bounce up. And also that GDP increase was the Fed, pumped a couple $1 trillion into the economy, which helped us buy more stuff. But here is on a quarterly basis, which is still crazy, right, Gordon? We're up 2.9%. I was shocked to see that. We had two, back-to-back declining months there, early 2022, but like the last 5 quarters has been surprising. Which
and the challenge is, everybody else has pulled back, but the government still has $2 trillion to spend over this next year. That's already set and ready to go from all of the bills that they've passed. So this is not going to really slow down, but real consumer spending is starting to trickle back quite far.
Yeah, it's almost like we should be able to track GDP. How's the gross domestic product with government spending removed? What would that show us, right?
Yeah.
Because you said 2 trillion, which is primarily the CHIPS Act, right?
Yep.
They did the Infrastructure Act, and there was another act or something, but it is roughly like even though those were passed 1, 2, 3 years ago, all the money is actually officially getting spent kind of right now.
Yeah, the Inflation Reduction Act, that isn't really reduction.
Yep. Because that affects inflation too, like the more stuff's being
government spending pushes it up. And really the only way that the Fed has, the only trigger they've got is to raise the rates. If government can't get the spending under control, that's their only trigger that they can do.
Which a lot of government spending is tied to trying to keep unemployment low, right? So I think if you didn't have, I've been watching the unemployment and expecting this to rise way faster than it's gone up. Like look at the last month, like all those were still floating around the middle 3s. I do wonder if that government spending was out, what it would look like. But until we see unemployment go up, that for me is one of the signs that we might not see some of the mortgage rate reductions we hope, right? Like you're going to have to see pain before they'll throw some water on the fire. Job openings, we've gone down a little bit, but it's still crazy. We're floating at 9.6 million jobs open still, right?
Yep.
Which, I still think we're seeing a recovery from COVID with just retail, restaurants, entertainment. Like those are a lot of the places I still see hiring signs. I don't know about you, but like some of those other industries like construction and stuff, I think you're seeing less and less of those, but it is crazy that it's still reporting us many job openings right there.
Well, and you've also got to figure 2020 was the peak where the boomers started retiring and they're not coming back into the workforce.
Yeah.
So all of those jobs have to be filled at some point, and we don't have the people to fill them.
Yep. Open the borders. U.S. Census regions, job openings and quits September 22 versus September 2023. So this is basically job openings has dropped 12%, but in the West, that's what we're considering this West category. We're down 18% job openings. And then job quits are basically just people leaving one job to leave to another one, right, Gordon? We're down 14%. Total, we're down 9% with all the regions combined.
And that shows a really good picture of where we're at in the economy. People are not feeling secure of hopping to another job to get that extra, $5 an hour or whatever.
Yeah. Real unemployment rate, you just see, U3 versus U6. The U6 does include the underemployed, people that maybe want more hours, the marginally attached or discouraged workers. So that is about another 3.2%. Kind of see on a month-to-month basis there. Annual labor force participation rate, all the total number of employed and unemployed workers divided by the civilian population. So basically the labor force participation, those who can go work 62% there out of all civilian population, and then 69% in Utah. By age group, so 25 to 54 years old, 83% is in the workforce, whereas 55 and older, 38.6%. Alludes to kind of what you were saying there. Here's real average hourly earnings. So even though money's kind of gone up, people have gotten some pay raises over the last several years, it doesn't feel like it because inflation is counted in this. So the last couple months, you're seeing the real average hourly earnings month over month, just slightly retracted the last 2 months, almost kind of averaging out at zero the last year. So this is where your former career comes into play and all your experience, Gordon, you being a purchase manager back in the day for some of those manufacturing and just, companies or industries that carry a lot of inventory, trying to get ahead of inventory, that type of stuff we'll talk about in a little bit. But let's talk about more about the inflation, which is the news story of the year, CPI core. There's a lot of other ones that we talk about, but here is your CPI, includes energy and food is your yellow line. So we bottomed out June-ish, and that's gone up just because primarily oil's gone back up, gas has gone back up, some of the food shortages has caused those to go up, but that's usually why the core CPI is what the government talks about the most, because it excludes energy and food, which are the volatile categories in there. And we finished September at 4.1. So they have made progress from 6.6 down to 4.1, still not at that target rate of 2%. So let's even just add that up. So we were 6% how long ago? Maybe October of 22. So it took us almost a full 12 months to go from 6 to 4.1, to drop 2%. So if we stay on that path or that pace, Gordon, with nothing else crazy that could come into there, it'll be a full another 12 months before we're actually officially finally hitting that 2% target.
Yeah, they're thinking honestly 2 years, just for the simple fact that they've got so much spending that they haven't even released yet.
Yeah. And the rate of, the inflation probably is going to slow down on that.
The easy part's been done. The hard part comes this next 2 years.
It's like when you want to lose 20 pounds, the first 10 pounds is the easiest. That last 10 pounds could take twice as much energy. You can see here kind of the projections on that. Here's inflation. You keep updating this. So this is at the end of September, which car, in 2023, average car price $48,000. 1989, it was $15,000, but adjusted for inflation, that $15,000 would have been $37,000 in today's dollars. So the real change is actually up 27%. Cars cost more with inflation added in there, more than they did back in 1989. Gas is a big one, right? 59.41%. Home prices, $388 median price right there, 2023, but 1989 it was $94,000. Inflation adjusted, it was $231,000. So up 68.07%. For a long time, this mortgage was a negative number because mortgage rates were so good, but mortgage is up 5.42%, wages up 20.43%. Here is, affordability in perspective. You can kind of see some of those categories. TVs way down. They've deflated. Hospital services, just crazy. College, no doubt. Medical, nursery, childcare. A lot of the most important categories is where we've been hit the hardest. And you break this up. You keep updating this, but here's the CPI selected category 12-month change. So surprisingly, natural gas over 12 months is down 19.9%. Fuel oil down 5.1%. Gas is up 3%. Electricity is 2.6%. Food away from home, 6%. Does that include DoorDash delivery fees? Probably.
Oh yeah. When was the last time you did a drive-through and got a shock at $16 for lunch?
Even like a fast casual where it used to be like $7, it's like I feel like I can't eat under $20 nowadays.
Oh, it's crazy.
But median home price down a little bit, real rent growth down a little bit, but again, real median home payment up 14.6 and interest rates up 17.8, which including the CPI, that is one of the major challenges.
And look at what they're reporting for rent growth and owner's equivalent. looking in the rear view mirror 2 years to get those numbers. And what we're seeing real in the market in the purple is not really reflective of what they're reporting.
Because your 4 over here is where you're putting some evidence where you're contesting the government's tracking system.
Yep.
Gordon for president. Here's your flexible and sticky CPI 12-month change, just some other ways of looking at the inflation number. The flexible, just those are a lot of just categories that can move up and down, a lot of retail and stuff's in there. But that one moved when you pulled this one moves a lot the last couple quarters, right?
Yep. Yeah, negative 2.6 up to 1%.
Yeah. Producers price index. Kind of see been hovering around some decent numbers the last 12 months. Real personal consumption expenditures. So this is basically us buying stuff, all right? Us going on the vacations, buying the cars, eating out. We haven't seen a drop. And this is the crazy thing. We talk about our lifestyle a lot, even though we have the common sense and the information to make good financial decisions, a lot of it is emotionally driven, which continues to propel our spending, right? Gary Keller said that, 2 years ago when we started talking about inflation, a year and a half ago, he says, you have to think inflation on a personal level. Like unless you yourself are stopping to go on the vacations and buying the cars and eating out, we're probably not going to solve the inflation problem unless it feels like everybody's doing that. And we continue to spend more, right? Gordon, why do you think that is?
Well, and the cost of goods has gone up so much. Yeah.
So maybe we're buying the same amount, but the prices are still up. So it's bumping that up.
I mean, I just put, heating and air conditioning in my house this year, and it was an additional $3,000 more than I was expecting to pay.
Yeah. Yep. Market-based personal consumption expenditures, excluding food and energy. So if you pull out the food and energy, still our personal consumption up 3.7%.
And this is the one that the Fed pays the most attention to. And this is the one that makes them extremely nervous that we're still hovering around that 4% range.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and this is the one we've talked about a bunch the last couple of months, is just our revolving consumer debt. This is in billions. So we're at 1.2 trillion in revolving consumer debt, which is usually credit cards, maybe some like HELOCs, that revolving debt category. But in just a couple of years, we've added over $200 billion to consumer debt, right? And even the interest rates of all those have just skyrocketed. So the amount of interest that we're paying isn't just more on the 200 billion. It feels like 500 billion. Here's federal debt, total public debt, billions. We're almost crossing that $33 trillion national debt. Do you know we spend it's 800 billion or 850 billion? It's 14% of our federal budget. We spend over $800 billion just on interest of our debt. So when we talk about our deficit, like it's not just that we're spending more than we're bringing in, but it's also more of the budget of the federal government is going to interest as well, right? And just in 3 years, we've added almost $10 trillion to our national debt. Like we've got to be paying attention to this at a higher level than we currently are.
Well, I was watching something last night on how the Fed missed the mark on several occasions. When we were down at 0%, they didn't issue bonds, long-term bonds. And now we're paying for that. They were asleep at the wheel again.
Yep.
So now all of that debt is costing us more money because they didn't extend those bonds.
Yeah. Well, I think Janet Yellen, Treasury Secretary, yesterday said that even just their projection, they're going to start focusing more on short-term bonds and long-term bonds. So you even saw a lot of the 10-year yields bump up a little bit yesterday.
Yeah.
But here is the annual personal savings rate of disposable income. So this is just basically the percent that's being saved of our disposable income. Like you saw right when COVID happened, everybody panicked and you just couldn't go anywhere. So we were forced to save a little bit more money and motivationally. But we're down to record lows again in that low 3s, 3% is going to savings. So we're spending more money on credit cards and our savings is just dropping, right? This one surprised me because, deposits. This is all deposits of commercial bank, like the amount of money they're holding in deposits. we know that it's been going down. People are pulling out money, or they're having to, spend it on bills or expenses or business expenses, but actually just popped up a little bit in Q3, which was a positive sign of the health of our banking system. But even some of those banks that went out, it's just because deposits decreased so fast that they couldn't pay their bills. So they ended up in an insolvent, FDIC walks in type of moment. But 0.8, it's not a ton, but it's at least positive that that's going up. Manufactured durable goods. This is orders to the manufacturers, all those retail sales trying to get ahead of ordering those, right? So this is usually a sign of what may be coming down the pipe on sales, right, Gordon? So 297 million or billion, 297 billion
Billion.
in new orders. Here is the purchasing index PMI, right at that.
And luckily this is kind of pushing up again.
What do you think that is?
We're heading into the Christmas season, and the overall economy, on the purchasing managers index, at least we're 1 month in a positive growth again.
Yeah. And they're projecting this holiday season to be just as good or better than last year. So they're predicting spending to be similar, right?
Yeah, well, similar, but they've still got stock from last year that they haven't pulled out.
Interesting.
So inventories are still contracting, 7-month trend.
Yeah, so direction, contracting, growing, too low. Yeah. Advanced retail sales percentage, another way of looking at that, up 3%. U.S. Index of Consumer Sentiment. This is kind of just a survey of how consumers are feeling, but it's been going up the last 12 months, right? 18 months. So that's a good sign. We saw the builder index drop, then kind of go back up as well. The misery index. This is basically unemployment and inflation rate. Lower numbers better, but we're actually, we went back up a little bit on that index scale. Unemployment, if unemployment goes up, you're going to see that drastically go up, right? So let's talk about Utah. Just so many positive things going on in Utah. My money's on Utah the next 10 years as we continue to grow. We've got a decent income. We usually tend to be great in that. We got a youthful population, a lot of economic development. So all that's positive. But here's our unemployment, 2.1 in 2022. So we usually always underpace unemployment, usually have a very robust workforce here. Here's the monthly unemployment. We have trickled up a little bit, but we ended September at 2.6 months of unemployment. We're 3.8 the country. You see some of those industries that are positive versus some of that are contracting a little bit. GDP, Utah still very healthy. But here is real GDP, all industry in billions, 192 billion of Utah GDP in 22. Year-over-year change, still pretty solid, even though the country went backwards there in 2020. We actually didn't go backwards. Last time we were backwards in any sort of GDP was 2009.
And that goes to, we didn't shut things down.
Yeah. Yep. Personal income growth, United States, you can see as purple line, Utah outpaced them a little bit, but Q2, last time we have this data, is up 7%. So up personal income growth up 7%. So talk about construction for a second. U.S. new privately owned housing units started 1 to 4. So these are the groups that are starting it and they plan on keeping it, right? Any other comments on this one? This is a new one that you pulled, Gordon.
Yep.
Historical average, basically 1,341,000. So here is the U.S. single family home starts. Again, really visually see the gap. Normally you want to be around the 1 million homes started built in the country per year, which we were right there in 2022. We ate into that shortage in 21 as a country, but almost 13 straight years below that million average, which we talk about. It's anywhere from 5 to 7 million homes, 5 to 7 million homes underbuilt in the country is some of the latest projections you'll see. The orange yellow is your building permits pulled. Your purple is the units completed. Kind of the trend that we're on those. Housing starts. Housing starts have dropped a little bit. So 2022, 20% less permits pulled than in 21. And then housing starts by year and billions, $7 billion of housing starts in Utah in 22. And this is old. This is the only time we had this data. You should just see at that point just how fast a lot of these supplies costs were shooting up. I was hopeful that you would see a lot of these decline in the last 12 months, but surprisingly, they're pretty sticky, right? It's hard to see a lot of those supply chain categories go down. Again, this is a quarter old data, but just cost recovery for interior remodeling projects. Hardwood floors, always get your money back on that. Kitchens, bathrooms, those are hard when sellers want to fix up and try to get their money back when they sell, but those are some good slides when you're consulting sellers on updating their listing. Here's exterior remodel projects. Weird, right? A lot of outdoor ones, you don't get your dollar for dollar back on remodeling those. So maybe don't put in the steel front door. US price index of single family homes under construction. Multifamily residential under construction index. But here's your builder confidence that we mentioned. 31 was our lowest the last 2 years. Popped back up to 55, and we're back down to 45, but still floating around the 40s, which is a 30% drop from last year, which was a 27% drop on builder confidence year over year. And then our new category, let's go through these, Gordon. I wanted to zip to these: household debt and credit. Total debt balance and its composition. So this is trillions of dollars. So as households, we have, what is that? Roughly $17 trillion of debt, like households in the United States do. You can see the purple is mortgage debt. So right now there's floating around $12 trillion of mortgage debt in the United States. The orange is HR, like home equity revolving. You got auto loans as gray. You got credit cards as yellow, student loan red, and then just other categories green. So you see our debt has just really added maybe $5 trillion of debt the last decade. Mortgage originations by credit score. This was also fascinating data. Just if you have above a 760, look at those mortgages originated of the category of 760 and above credit score. If people have the best credit, we're going crazy.
And that's why this this downturn is going to be a little bit different. You go back to 07 and look at that red.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Auto loan originations by credit score. You can see a lot of the 660 to 719. That gray was a pretty big chunk the last couple of years. Total debt balance by delinquency status. So red is severely derogatory, orange 120 days late, 90 days late, 60 days late, and then green's 30 days late. So you can see pretty healthy delinquency compared to recession, right? We were at 12% average delinquency. We're right around 3%. Our hunch is this is going to go up, right? Some of the debt, and you're picking cars. Cars, you think the category of all these new fancy Range Rovers with big loans on them. Percent of balance 90 days delinquent by loan type. So all the federal, are they paying off student loans? Are they not paying off student loans? Are they taking them out of delinquency? You can see basically student loans in the 3-year period went to zero just because they did a moratorium on payments and they were going to try to do some of that forgiveness. We would assume now that a lot of that's back in repayment status, we're going to see that go right back up to that 10+%. You think, Gordon?
Oh yeah, and you're going to see huge headlines. The sky's falling. It's 1,000%. Well, yeah, because it was zero.
Yeah. So read through the data. Even if we get back up to the 10% of all student loans are in delinquencies, that's probably back to where we were for almost a decade. But the headlines are going to really be eye-catching, on the way they would choose to report that. But mortgage debt, look how low mortgage debt of 90 days delinquent is. Purple credit card. Number of consumers with new foreclosures and bankruptcies. Okay, so this is in the thousands. So Q2, last time we had the data, foreclosures, that's saying 38,000 people had a foreclosure in the country. Is that right, Gordon?
That's what I'm seeing so far.
And then 114,000 were for new bankruptcies in Q2. But wait, go back. So you look at the bankruptcy in 2005. I didn't know it was that high.
Yeah, that one shocked me. The bankruptcies started before the shift in the market.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
I would have thought it would have happened after.
Yeah, yep. Or maybe they're trying to get ahead of it, I guess. Maybe trying to file bankruptcy to keep their house or something before foreclosure world. Third-party collections. So the orange is average collection amount per person with an item. So average collections, just above $1,500. Not too bad. Proportion of consumers with collection, that's been going down the last several years. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Anything summarizing our distressed foreclosure section?
Some really good numbers that show that the economy really isn't as bad as the shock value that everybody's talking about, the crash bros.
Yeah. I agree. Could be worse for sure in a lot of categories, but you saw which ones are not awesome right now. But as always, if you just joined us on kwutah.com, you can go access these PDFs. You're welcome to use them in any of your consultations, your meetings, your training, your SOI communication. kwutah.tv just simply goes to our YouTube channel that has this recorded if you want to go back and rewatch some of it. All right. Anything else, Gordon?
And that won't be done until this afternoon. I still have to render the video.
Awesome. Well, realtors, you are rock stars. I know there's a lot of chaos going on, a lot of things hitting the news right now, but control what you can control. And that is waking up, doing what you do, making your calls, helping buyers and sellers. And you know what? We'll be all right. I think, Gordon, I almost was ready to delete my news apps just to let the noise just quiet down for a little bit and just focus on what we do best. And that's helping people realize their real estate dreams for sure. If I don't see you, next one will be probably end of January, 1st of February on the next market report. So if I don't see some of you, happy holidays, happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and crush the fourth quarter. Let's go out with a bang. Thanks, everybody, for being on the call. See you later.